How you doing? The question was asked, what foods do we eat for weight loss? Whole versus processed, so on and so forth. If you stay with me to the end, I'll not only answer that question, but I'll tell you why I'm giving away my entire course for free, and what you're going to get with that. I did a little PowerPoint for you on processed foods and so on and so forth. But at the end, like I said, exactly what to eat, where to get the nutritional products, cost per day, how to prepare it every day, meal plan, meal 1 through whatever, all the way through. So stick with me to the end, and I'll tell you why I'm giving that away free. Okay, so what is it exactly that makes whole foods non-fattening? Well, first, they're usually low in fat. As you probably know, fat is fattening. Next, carbohydrates in the whole foods are natural, just the way they come from the earth. So unlike refined and processed foods, they are packaged with dietary fiber. All the roughage and the bulk is still present. So carbohydrate and fiber, as we have seen, are your powerful allies in the battle of the bulge. Although many complex explanations are frequently offered for why and how individuals become overweight in the first place, it's really quite simple. We eat too much, and we eat too much of the wrong kinds of foods, and we don't exercise enough. So the modern diet is about 42% fat. Most of that is saturated animal fat, which is more than twice the calories of protein or complex carbohydrates, meaning per gram, there's 9 calories of fat, 9 calories in a gram of fat, 4 calories in a gram of protein and complex carbohydrate, in a carbohydrate. So food processing has also get into many of the foods commonly eaten, and since the bulk or the natural food fiber is removed, it's easier to fit more food and calorie dense foods into the stomach in less time. So Americans have come to rely primarily on processed foods. The U.S. has the distinction of becoming the first nation on earth to consume processed foods for more than 50% of its diet. The average American now consumes 9 pounds of chemical additives per year in the form of preservatives, artificial colorings, flavorings, texture agents. So this American diet is actually fairly typical of the average diet in other affluent industrialized nations as well. Yet, as longevity and general good health of people whose diets contain few processed foods will attest, the use of chemical food additives is not necessarily for the maintenance of good health. So, an excess of calories and saturated animal fats coupled with nutrient loss in processing the use of additives is largely responsible for the staggering rate of health problems in the U.S. The National Center for Health Statistics puts out a report, current health interview survey it's called. It states that nearly 1 in every 2 Americans has a chronic condition that may result in a disease of some sort. So to reverse this situation, it's recommended that we eat whole foods, primarily of plant origin, which are lower in calories, contain less saturated fat, no chemical additives if possible, and require little or no processing. The modern diet, which we'll call it the modern diet, relies heavily on processed and synthetic foods. It's much too high in saturated animal fats, cholesterol, highly refined vegetable fats, and is deficient in complex carbohydrates, fiber, and of course natural vitamins and minerals have been stripped away. It's excessively high in salt, sugar, and chemical additives. As a matter of fact, some 3,500 chemical additives are in our food supply, and the modern diet is increasingly subject to criticism from standpoint of nutritional quantity and quality, meaning we eat too much and the quality is not good enough. Now, lying with statistics is a favorite game among the people to make a fast buck. So if I were to tell you that we're living a whole lot worse than people did 100 years ago, you'd probably say, well, you don't have to. But when my parents were young, people's life expectancy was shorter than they are today. So how can you possibly say that we're doing worse? Well, there are 2 reasons to support this statement. First, there's a difference in life expectancy, and what I mean, and I'll explain what I mean. And secondly, for the most part, we're suffering from entirely different diseases than people did in past times. If you look at the vital statistics for the period between 1870 and 1970, you'll find that although our life expectancy today is 23 years longer than it was 100 years ago, that's largely because of diseases in rates or decreases, I'm sorry, in rates of infant mortality and maternal death during childbirth. So in 1870, the infant mortality rate was about 15 times what it is today. And the increase in life expectancy, I'm quoting, is an increase of life expectancy at birth. But what if you're not an infant, and what if you're past the age of childbearing? So this is where the nasty surprise comes in. So if you were over the age of 45, your life expectancy in 1970 was only 6 years greater than it was in 1870. So statistics cover up the simple truth under misleading figures. So you may find this conclusion hard to understand. During the last 75 years, scientists have developed vaccines and antibiotics that can save us from all the above listed: typhoid fever, cholera, smallpox, on and on and on. Also the improvements in public sanitation and the adoption of sterile procedures in hospitals were super important against the war on germs. Now, you would think that the rise in life expectancy over the age of 45 would be greater than 6 years. But unfortunately, during that same time period, Americans changed the way they ate. The result was a radical increase in heart disease, stroke, cancer, diabetes, a radical shortening of life expectancy. If you haven't thought about it, you may find this starting a bit of news. People ate a lot differently in the past. Only what we would call aristocrats gorged themselves on meat and cheese. The vast majority of the people were either farmers or workers. They were poor, and the food they ate was simple and healthy: starchy vegetables, whole grains, fruits, vegetables. The breads that they ate were made from unrefined whole grains. Meat was something they ate only in small amounts, once or twice a week, if that, if they could afford to buy it. In those days, there were no Big Macs. Even cheese was a bit of a luxury. Milk was the food that they breastfed infants. Milk from cows and goats was devoted to feeding their own young or swine in order to ready them for market. As for the plethora of fatty and greasy and processed chemicalized sweets and garbage that clogs the supermarket aisles today and the fast food drive-thrus, none of it even had been invented. The biggest advantages of technology, as you can see, have led to the largest and most detrimental alterations in diet since life began on this planet. All right, so the apple study. So I'll tell you about another study which further explains what happens when we alter foods by removing fiber and bulk, thereby increasing the calorie density, meaning more calories per quantity. This study involves apples. So 10 healthy people were given given test meals of either whole apples, apple sauce, or apple juice. Each meal contained the same amount of sugar. It took 17 minutes to eat the apples, 6 minutes to eat call it puree, applesauce, and 30 seconds to drink the juice. So it's no surprise to learn that individuals reported greater satisfaction after eating the apples than after drinking the juice with the applesauce, and of course, intermediate level of satisfaction on the applesauce. That's why we're going to eat whole, unprocessed foods along with our bioengineered items that we're going to need to have as well for nutrition. All right, so what are the results? So the experiment went way beyond how the subjects felt. They recorded the changes in blood sugar and insulin levels to determine if there was a psychological basis for the differences in the degrees of hunger satisfaction. So blood sugar rose to similar levels after all 3 meals, but the insulin level of the blood rose twice as high after the juice and then after the whole apple. And 1 to 3 hours later, the blood sugar levels dropped back to normal after the apples, but to a level distinctly below normal as opposed to the juice. And the intermediate but below normal blood sugar blood level occurred after the applesauce. So the below normal levels of the blood sugar are called rebound hypoglycemia, and are usually associated with feelings of hunger. Thus the fiber in the whole apples reduced the demand for insulin and produced a longer lasting feeling of satisfaction. So in other words, whole apples produce long-term hunger satisfaction. In contrast, apple juice and applesauce, both were more refined and only short-term satisfaction. and soon after eating the refined portion of the carbohydrates, they were hungry again. So what the apple study does is shows us that the more we move away from the whole foods and refine them, the more we move towards a more refined food, the more fat the food becomes because of the quantity, calories per quantity. Second example, cup of grapes. A cup of raw grapes, which is 153 grams, directly from the vine has 106 calories. But you remove the water from the grapes and consume raisins, and you get 4 times as many calories. Now add sugar, lard, flour, and make pie out of it. Then you have some really serious calories. Now the same thing happens when you move from whole grains to white bread to cake. Calories increase with each refining step as more bulk is removed and sweeteners added. Moreover, as mentioned, the connection with fat, refined carbohydrates such as sugar, they stimulate your appetite and encourage overeating. The more carbohydrates are refined, the more likely you are to eat large quantities without being aware of it. For example, as the apple study showed, you're likely to consume more calories drinking apple juice than if you eat the whole apple. You're tempted to drink more apple juice, and of course it's easier, it's sweeter, and no chewing is required. The juice goes down fast and takes up less room in your stomach. And so it's not, carbohydrates are not your enemy, are not our enemy. It is processing, the taking out of the bulk of the foods. All right, great, you're back. Like I said, my name is Dean Larson. Thanks for staying. We talked about whole foods and versus processed foods and the difference and why it's such a huge difference in weight loss. So the next step for you is get my free course. Once again, you're going to get exactly what to eat every day, where to get the nutritional products, the cost per day, exactly what to eat, how to prepare it, the grocery list, the entire course in PDF and in video that you can access at any point in time, your ongoing questions answered with individual responses and or group discussions, generally individual responses. And most of all, I'm going to show you how to get your dream body without driving yourself crazy. So go to howtoeatforweightloss.com, or if there's a link below, click on that, and that'll take you to the big video that tells you everything, and it'll also email you access to all the products, all the things that I told you about today. Great. Congratulations.